Welcome to the Reflective Leader Podcast, where we hold up a mirror and explore how we live, how we lead, and who we're becoming along the way. I'm your host, Krista Johnson. And today I want to talk about something that sits quietly underneath leadership, but shapes almost everything about the experiences people have at work. It's the set of things your team needs from you that they may never say out loud. Many leaders operate with a fairly simple assumption, which is, if someone on my team needs something from me, they'll tell me. But the reality inside most organizations is more complicated than that. People don't always say what they need from their leaders. Sometimes that's because of hierarchy, or sometimes it's because they don't want to appear difficult or even ungrateful. And sometimes people simply aren't sure that saying something or asking for something will actually change anything. So instead, those needs can remain unspoken. And part of the reason for that is the influence leadership naturally carries. When you're in a leadership role, your decisions shape people's day-to-day experiences at work. We know that. They influence someone's growth, the opportunities they're given access to, and in many cases, their financial security. And because of that, people often think very carefully about what they say to their leaders, what they ask their leaders for, and then also what they choose to just keep to themselves. The work of leadership becomes something deeper than simply responding to what people say. It requires paying attention to what may be sitting underneath the surface, because the environment a leader creates begins to shape how people see themselves. Over time, it can influence whether someone starts to see themselves as capable, as trusted and growing, or whether they begin to doubt their voice, doubt themselves, and start to hold back their ideas. And that influence does not stop when the workday ends. When people close their laptops at the end of the day, they don't automatically leave their work experiences behind. I know I don't. The way they are led often travels with them into the rest of their lives. It shapes the energy they carry into their evenings, the way they show up with their families, and the conversations they have with the people they love. When you pause and you really sit with that, the responsibility of leadership begins to feel much bigger than simply directing work or managing your team's performance. Leadership becomes something closer to stewardship of the human experience. I often think about something Simon Sinek says when he talks about leadership. He reminds us that the people who work with us are in our care, not under our control, and not simply resources we manage, but they're human beings who spend a significant portion of their lives in the environment that we as leaders create. Their growth, their confidence, their sense of belonging, and sometimes even their well-being are shaped by the quality of leadership they experience from us. Because a company's most valuable resource is not its strategy or its technology, it is its people. So when we invest in people, when we invest in our talent, that investment is never wasted. So today, I want to explore 5 things your team may need from you that they may never say out loud. These are those needs I mentioned earlier that often live quietly underneath the surface of teams. And we'll start with the first one. The first thing your team often needs from you, even if they never say it directly, is emotional steadiness. In episode 2 of this podcast, we talked in more depth about regulative and reflective practices and the role that they play in leadership. So today, I want to briefly revisit that idea because for me, it sits at the heart of how leaders show up for their teams. One of the things we know about human behavior is that emotions move through groups. Leaders are not separate from that dynamic. In many ways, as leaders, we amplify it. A regulated leader regulates the room they are in. When a leader is grounded, when they're steady, they're thoughtful in the way they respond to situations, that emotional tone spreads through the team. And when a leader is reactive, overwhelmed, or emotionally unsteady, that energy spreads just as quickly, if not quicker. Which is why strong leadership often begins with self-leadership first. So regulation usually comes first, and for some leaders, regulative practices might include things like stillness, meditation, prayer, breath work, or simply just taking a moment to pause before responding to a situation, to an email, or to a conversation. Once us as leaders, when we have created that steadiness, then reflection becomes possible. So as I mentioned in episode 2, reflective practices might include things like coaching, journaling, conversations with trusted peers, or it can just be time spent thinking about what is happening beneath the surface of a situation. Those two practices together help leaders stay grounded in really complex moments. And when leaders do that consistently, their teams begin to feel it. Their teams feel steadier, they feel safer, and they feel more confident navigating the work that's in front of them. The second thing teams often need from leaders that they may not share with you is clarity. If you look across organizations today, you'd be hard-pressed to find one that is not experiencing some level of complexity. And we are operating inside macroeconomic environments that shift quickly. Technology, particularly AI, is really transforming the way work happens. So many organizations, probably the one that you're in as well, are navigating things like reorgs, layoffs, leadership transitions, new initiatives, changing priorities. And for the people inside those organizations, that can create a lot of uncertainty. Information moves quickly, decisions evolve, and it can be really difficult to understand what everything means for the day-to-day work people are doing. And this is where you, as a leader, play an incredibly important role. Part of leadership is helping teams make sense of the complexity around them. In organizational theory, because of course I'm a research nerd, so I have to bring this in, this is often referred to as sense making. So researchers have written extensively about how leaders help people interpret and understand the environments they're operating in. Leaders act as filters. They take the complexity of what is happening in the broader organization, and they translate it into something that their teams or the people in their care can actually understand and process. They help people connect the dots between what is happening at the organizational level and what it actually means for the team and the work that's in front of them. And sometimes that means saying something like, hey, here is what we know right now. Sometimes it means saying, here's what we don't know yet. And sometimes it means helping people understand what matters most in the near term so they can focus their energy there. Clarity that leaders provide, it doesn't remove the complexity around us, but it does help our teams and the people in our care navigate through it. And when leaders help teams make sense of what they're hearing and experiencing in the broader organizational context, people can feel steadier in their work. The third thing that teams often need from leaders is psychological safety. And we know this term is kind of a buzz term, and it has been for some time. It's become incredibly common in leadership conversations over the last several years. And much of that work comes from Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School. Her research has shown that psychological safety is one of the strongest predictors of team learning, innovation, and performance. Let me say that again. Psychological safety is one of the strongest predictors of team learning, innovation, and performance. At its core, psych safety means that people feel safe speaking up. That's what it means. They feel comfortable asking questions. They feel comfortable sharing ideas, admitting mistakes, and then offering perspectives without fear of either punishment or even fear of embarrassment if they're wrong. But psychological safety is not created by a sentence on a slide or a value written on a wall. It develops over time through patterns of behavior. It's shaped by the way leaders respond when someone asks a question, or when someone offers a different perspective in a meeting, or even when someone acknowledges a mistake they made. One of the most practical ways leaders can reinforce psychological safety on their teams is by helping their team learn from mistakes rather than hide from them. For example, when something goes wrong, a leader might say, "This didn't go the way we expected, so let's slow down and let's look at it together." What can we learn from what happened, and what will we do differently next time? That kind of response shifts the focus from blame to learning. And when leaders consistently create that kind of environment, teams begin to participate more fully in the work. Another part of psychological safety is holding teams accountable for creating that environment with each other. So leaders, it's our responsibility, obviously, to model it, but it's the important work of the team to carry it forward. The fourth thing teams need from their leaders that they may not say out loud is feedback. Human beings naturally tell themselves stories about their performance. And without feedback, those stories often go untested. So feedback helps make performance real. It helps people understand what is working, what is making an impact, and where adjustments will help them grow. But so many leaders avoid giving feedback. I see this in my day-to-day life all the time. Sometimes we assume people already know what they're doing well, so we don't give them the feedback. Sometimes we hesitate to bring up difficult topics. And sometimes the pace of the work and how much we have on our plate as leaders, it just gets in the way and we don't prioritize giving the feedback. One of my dear friends, Courtney Ramsey, often talks with leaders about a concept she calls quit hitting snooze. It's this idea that leaders repeatedly delay important conversations, especially conversations that are redirecting an unhelpful behavior. But those conversations matter. We have to quit hitting snooze on those important moments of connection. Creating a simple structure, like a weekly one-on-one with your direct reports, can make feedback a normal and expected part of work. And listen, I know you know all of these things as a leader. It's just a good reminder to set yourself up for success by having that weekly one-on-one. Recognition helps people understand what behaviors to repeat. So the redirection conversation and the recognition conversations are just as important. So let me give you an example. This is a statement that you could use with your team. When you opened the meeting by clearly outlining the agenda and the decisions we needed to make, it helped the team stay focused and it made the conversation much more productive. I would love to see you continue doing that. So that's a recognition conversation. Now, a redirection or feedback conversation, like just a moment ago, helps people adjust in ways that maybe strengthen their impact. So let me give you an example of that. I noticed when the meeting invite went out, there wasn't an agenda included. And then when the meeting started, we really didn't begin by outlining the purpose. That made it harder for the group to stay aligned on what we needed to accomplish. Beginning with an agenda and then ending with clear action steps will help the team make the most of that time. I'd love to see you try that in future meetings. How can I support you in doing that? Both examples that I just gave you are forms of feedback. They are the recognition and the redirection. And both forms of feedback follow the same simple structure: observation, impact, future commitment. And when leaders deliver feedback in a grounded, emotionally balanced way, using that framework, people are far more open to hearing it and also growing from it. The fifth thing teams often need from leaders is investment in their development. Many of us can probably recall a moment somewhere in our careers when a leader or mentor shared something they saw in us. Maybe they named a strength we had not fully recognized yet. And often those moments did not stop with someone simply naming that strength. They also created an opportunity for us to demonstrate it. They gave us a stretch assignment. Maybe they invited us into a new project, or they could have created exposure that really allowed us to shine and to grow. Those small moments may not seem that significant at the time, and when you're in it, it doesn't feel as significant, but over time, they begin to shape what people really believe about themselves. Strong leaders help illuminate gifts people may not yet see in themselves, and They create environments where those gifts can grow through safe to fail experiments, which I love to set up on my team. Those are really those types of experiments where, they can test a new skill and it's okay if maybe it doesn't go perfectly. Things like stretch assignments, exposure to leadership, whether that's even more senior leadership or other leaders, and advocacy in rooms where those individuals are not present. As a leader, I am always thinking about how to help people grow into meaningful career paths and career paths that feel aligned with their future goals and their growth. And part of that work, as I mentioned earlier, is illuminating their potential. Part of it is creating opportunities for them, helping them walk through the door. And part of it is ultimately training the people who will one day step into my role. That's really important. I'm always thinking about who my bench is for my role and wanting to get them ready for that. So, in many ways, leadership is about developing the next generation of leaders, the leaders that will come long after you and I have retired and ridden off into the sunset. When you step back and you look at all of this together, leadership starts to look a lot like stewardship of the human experience, as I mentioned earlier. It's so much more than just managing deadlines, directing work, or managing performance. And very simply, it starts to look a lot like the responsibility we hold for the people who are in our care. Your team may never directly say that they need your steadiness. They may never ask you directly for clarity. They may never say they need your willingness to create psychological safety or your ability to offer them honest, direct feedback that recognizes them and redirects them when needed. Or they may never directly ask for your investment in their growth. But those things shape the experience people have working with you every single day. The way we lead influences how people see themselves, how they experience their work, and often the energy they carry with them into the rest of their lives, as I mentioned. Which means, again, leadership is not only about outcomes, it's about the environment we create and the experience people have inside of that environment. So as you move through this week, it might be worth asking yourself a simple question. What might my team need from me that they have not yet said out loud? And if you are listening to this episode and if you're reflecting on your own experience, I would love to hear from you. What do you wish your leader understood about what you need from them? Tell me in the comments below. Until next time.